Well, all right. First things first, y'all. This is actually a response video to 978Diplomats34, aka the Fat King. All right. Now, earlier he made a video about titled "Adrien Broner is great for boxing." Okay. He pretty much emotionally took a shot at people who either criticize Adrien Broner constructively or they're bashing him. So it seems like he mostly has a problem with that. Now, no disrespect to to the Fat King. I really respect him a lot. But it seems like whenever someone criticizes Adrien Broner, even in a constructive manner, he seems to have a problem with it. For example, he had a problem with me criticizing Broner. Well, I exactly didn't really criticize him. I actually mentioned the fact that he was overrated in my debate with EBG a while back, and he didn't like that fact at all. So, let's make this clear, y'all. You can have a favorite fighter, that's cool. I've got no problem with that, but you can't defend your fighter at all costs, man, because that makes you a fanboy. I'm not saying 978's Diplomat is a fanboy, but the way he approaches and defends his favorite fighters, it comes off to be that way. Okay, so the one thing I have to say is that when someone criticizes your fighter in a critique manner, you're going to have to accept criticism. And the reason why I say that is because no fighter is above criticism. Not even my favorite fighters are above criticism, and I accept that. Okay, the only thing I can do is to defend them in a constructive way. Now, he also mentioned that there's no other pay-per-view star that's no other fighter who can equal up to Adrien Broner's star status, eliminating Canelo Alvarez and Manny Pacquiao and all that stuff, and et cetera, et cetera. Well, all I have to say is Anthony Joshua measures up to those standards. And the reason why I say that is because Anthony Joshua just drew 400,000 pay-per-view buys in the UK domestically, and he's still a heavyweight prospect. Not only that, he drew over 1 million views in Europe. What does that tell you? Adrien Broner hasn't come close to that. He hasn't headlined a pay-per-view. Not yet. All right. And he also mentioned that Timothy Bradley and Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia doesn't measure up to Adrien Broner's star power, and they don't equal the numbers that he do when he headlines a boxing show or a boxing event. Well, the Fat King mentioned that if anyone wants to prove him wrong, show him the numbers. Well, I am going to show him the numbers, and I'm going to prove to you why he's wrong in that situation. Okay? So, and he also mentioned that being a 4th division champion is great, and there's no other fighter current today that's done it. Well, Miguel Cotto has done it. So, but I'll get into that a little bit later. Let's go over with the numbers. First things first, you see this slide that I drafted here, or this document. It says here TV rating / pay-per-view buys per fighter. This is going off the headlining basis. So you see Keith Thurman, Adrien Broner, and Danny Garcia. Now, all three of these fighters did not headline a pay-per-view. However, Danny Garcia and Adrien Broner were featured on a pay-per-view undercard. Okay? Keith Thurman has not. But let's look at Keith Thurman. He first headlined a show on the PBC debut against Robert Guerrero. He drew 4.2 million views. Then after that fight, he drew with Luis Collazo 1.2 million views. All right, so if you add that together, that comes out to be 5.4 million views in total. Then after that, you have Adrien Broner. He drew 1.4 million views against Vicente Escobedo, then 1 million views against Antonio DeMarco, 1.3 against Gavin Reese, 1.3 against Paulie Malignaggi, 1.3 against Marcos Maidana, and 2.4 against Sean Porter, and 609,000 views against Carlos Acavia. So there's one point that's debunked on the Fat King here, because he said in his video that Adrien Broner is the only fighter that has consistently drew high rating on TV rates when it comes to his fights. Well, this particular fight with Lakabeev was totally a tank. It totally was a flop in a way. It didn't even draw as high as the numbers it did with the because I know on that same night you had Pastel and Matisse fighting, and I believe that fight drew more than the Adrien Broner and Lakabeev fight. Okay, so if you sum that all together, Adrien Broner garnered 9.4 million views total. Now let's look at Danny Garcia. In the Eric Morales fight, he drew 1.2 million, the first fight. Second fight, considerably less than that. He drew 729,000 views. I don't know why I put millions, but thousands. Then after that, he fought Amir Khan. He drew 1.3 million. With Khan, then the Mauricio Herrera fight, 1.4. Lightning Rod Salka the Bum, he drew 612,000 views. Lamont Peterson, 3.4 million views. Paulie Malignaggi, 1 million. And Robert Guerrero, 3 million. Now, if you sum all that together, Danny Garcia has a total of 12.6 million views combined. All right. So, why the disparity? And I'll tell you why. You can say, well, Dan, you got more fights on there than Broner. For Garcia than Broner. Yes, that's true, but you have to understand that Broner hasn't really been in much higher profile fights as Garcia, so that's the reason why there's more fights on this list here. Number one. Number two, Garcia has fought better opposition than Broner. Okay, even though I've criticized Garcia on his level of opposition as of late and the way he's getting gifted decisions in some fights. But the fact remains that he has fought better opposition than Broner. Now, mind you, they do have Paul Malignaggi on their resumes. So we're going to exclude that in a way, but at the same time, they did draw over 1 million when they fought him. Then you have Keith Thurman, 5.4 million views. Mind you, Keith Thurman drew 5.4 million in only 2 fights. It took Broner almost nearly 5 fights to draw that much amount of views. 5 fights. It only took Thurman 2. And guess what? He got another high profile fight coming up against Sean Porter. And I guarantee you this, it's going to draw no more, at least 3 million views. It might get higher than that. In my prediction, I think it'll probably do 3.5 million. Okay, if it doesn't, it won't surprise me, but I think it'll draw no less than 3 million, I should say. Okay. So with that said, I can't understand how the Fat King can argue that these two guys don't have the big star power compared to Broner, which I showed you right here that their draw rate measures up to Adrien Broner. In fact, Keith Thurman even sold out in his last fight against Luis Collazo. When he fought Collazo, he sold out. Yes, it was a small arena, but he sold out. So there's another argument that's been debunked. Okay, now Danny Garcia, same thing. When he went back to Puerto Rico, he sold out in that fight against Mauricio Herrera, which we all felt that Herrera won that fight, but Garcia sold out. Now, Timothy Bradley, okay, now he also mentioned that Timothy Bradley is not quite as the biggest star than Adrien Broner. Well, I'm going to debunk that fact as well. As you can see, Timothy Bradley drew 1.2 million against Nate Campbell, 2.3 million against Alexander. Ruslan Provodnikov, which was a damn brutal fight, 1.4 million views, 910,000 against Brandon Rios. Jesse Vargas, 1.1 million, and Diego Chavez, 966,000 views. So if you sum all that up together, Tim Bradley garnered 7.8 million views. And guess what I have in bold black? Pay-per-views. Timothy Bradley headlined 3 pay-per-views, man. I don't know why he may have neglected this fact, but he did. So if you add those numbers together, he drew 890,000 pay-per-view buys against Pacquiao in the first fight, 800,000 against Pacquiao in the second fight, and the Juan Mayo Marquez 375,000 pay-per-view buys. Okay, if you sum all that together, that's 2 million pay-per-view buys combined. So again, you mentioned, bro, that Timothy Bradley doesn't have the star power, can't draw as near as much as Adrien Broner. Well, explain to me how the Timothy Bradley is able to headline 3 pay-per-views. Yeah, you can say, well, it's Manny Pacquiao. Well, guess what? Manny Pacquiao fought a very good opponent. And that's the reason why I was able to get close to 1 million. Okay? I haven't seen Adrien Broner headline a pay-per-view. And you also mentioned in your video that there's talk about Adrien Broner being the next pay-per-view star. He's close to that than anyone else. Well, I already debunked that in my beginning of my presentation here. Anthony Joshua comes close to that in a way. But at the same time, Adrien Broner has not headlined a pay-per-view. You said that he's being geared up to that point. Well, I've heard this talk for the last 4 years now. His management team has been setting up Broner to be in a pay-per-view status for a while now. That would explain why his brashness and his arrogance and his level of disrespect to certain opponents and certain things outside the ring. That's what all this comes about. Yes, I agree that draws attention. I think that's good for boxing. I agree to be brashy, to be arrogant, and create all this controversy. That's cool. But the problem is that Adrien Broner has not lived up to the expectations as people have thought he would do. Okay, he had that test against Marcos Maidana. He failed. He got steamrolled. He had another test against Sean Porter. He failed. All right. Since then, he went back down in weight. He got a title shot against Akabiev, which many people didn't think he deserved that title shot. And he shouldn't have, because he was coming off a loss. And his opponent was coming off a loss as well. Okay. So they made that a regular title, which shut out Jose Benavidez, who deserved that shot because he was the interim champion at that weight class at 140. And the WBA came under fire for that. All right. Yes, he became the champion. All right. And in his own words, and I'm quoting Adrien Broner, he said himself that from here on out, I'll be taking control of my own career. I'm going to fight who I want to fight, how I want to fight, and when I'm going to fight these guys. Look what we got. Ashley Theophane, his first title defense. Ashley Theophane, a guy whose best win in his record is against Chop Chop Corley, who's been beaten so many damn times, okay? So many damn times. And credit, with all fairness, Theophane has never been knocked out in either one of his fights, so I'll give him credit when credit is due. But he's definitely not a top-level fighter. All right. To make matters worse, Broner got upgraded to damn super WBA champion status. He has yet to make a title defense. Yeah, that's not Broner's fault. I get that. But you got to understand that he's been pretty much handed opportunities to become a 4-division champion, if you look at it. All right. Now, according to the WBA standards, to become a super champion, you have to have either 5 consecutive title defenses of your regular title, or if you happen to unify with the other recognized belts such as the WBO, IBF, and the WBC. Okay? And Broner haven't done neither. Neither one, he gets upgraded. And let's go a little further back on that, all right? In his first World Championship, he won the super featherweight title against Vicente Rodriguez, all right, in a vacant fashion. He had a couple of title defenses, one against Eloy Perez, and then the other against Vicente Escobedo, who, by the way, Broner didn't even make weight for that fight, so he lost the title on the scales. Yes, he beat Escobedo. He fights Antonio DeMarco, and got his title shot against him. The same DeMarco who got destroyed by Edwin Villaro, who was also in a brutal war against Jorge Linares, which after that fight, in my opinion, DeMarco was not the same fighter. He considerably slowed down. But at the same time, I give Broner credit for that because that's actually the greatest win on his record. Now, you want to cite Paulie Malignaggi. Let me tell you something about Paulie Malignaggi. Paulie Malignaggi was the weakest champion at the 147 division. And that was a cherry-pick fight at its best. And let me explain why. The reason why is because Broner had opportunities to fight other champions when he moved up 2 weight classes. He had Devin Alexander at IBF. He had Timothy Bradley at WBO, but he chose Malignaggi, the weakest champion. And he barely got past Malignaggi. And many people felt that he lost that fight. Barely got past him. And this is the same Malignaggi who can hardly punch, okay? Who could fight flat-footed at times, but can hardly punch, keeps his hands low very often, and he does, is vulnerable to taking shots, okay? The same Malignaggi who got stopped twice by Haddon and Khan, who took a beating against Miguel Cotto and had 2 tough fights against Juan Diaz. And pretty much Malignaggi was a shot fighter before the Broner fight. There's no there's no disputing that, okay? And Timothy Bradley. Let me tell you something about Timothy Bradley. Timothy Bradley has beaten 3 undefeated champions in their primes. Lamont Peterson, David Alexander, and Jesse Vargas. Has Adrien Broner done either one of those things? No, he has not. Timothy Bradley has been a unified champion in 1 division, which is at 140. Has Adrien Broner been a unified champion in either division within the 4 divisions that he won titles? No, he did not. Has he ever been a linear champion? No, he has not. He hasn't even attempted to unify with anybody. Timothy Bradley did that. Timothy Bradley also defeated a prime Luis Carlos Borrego, a guy that nobody wanted to fight at one point, okay, at 147. You know what Tim Bradley did? He says, you know what, since nobody wants to fight him, I'll step up and from 140 and fight Abrego. And what did Tim Bradley do? He stepped up and beat Abrego, took his undefeated record, the first guy to beat him, okay? He had a gauge in the war rules on Provodnikov, beat him in adversity. He beat Kendall Holt in his prime. He also beat Brandon Rios, the only guy to knock out Brandon Rios. So with that said, you're totally inaccurate on your analysis, my friend. Let me know what you guys think. Signing off. Peace.